So good morning. I'm really looking forward to talking about how the innovation landscape is changing. To say today that everywhere around us we have an explosion of digital technologies would be a mild understatement. The pace of that innovation is changing more rapidly before. And as we speak to companies and organizations out there, we say that pace of innovation and those digital technologies are changing companies from their strategy, they're evolving their operating model, they're changing effectively how they need to deal with support functions. New opportunities and challenges exist on data management and IT, and even the landscape around how we adjust and deal with people. All of that impacted by innovation. In that changing landscape, there's a lot of comments and conversations around what is the need for strategy, how can it be synchronized and connected to innovation? Is it even separable from each other? Point number one. And point number two, are we really going after innovation or are we trying to drive towards value? The combination of these two questions we're going to explore in our panel. And Curtis, I'm going to ask you to provide us an overview of how you think about innovation.
So I was CEO of SRI International. Some of you know it as Stanford Research Institute for 16 years. When I went to SRI, it had been failing for 20 years. And we did the things I'm going to talk about, and when I retired, we grew the organization 3.5 times, and we created many tens of billions of dollars of new economic value with innovations such as high-definition television, Intuitive Surgical, that by itself is a $50 billion company, and Siri, which you all know, on the iPhone. And what was interesting is we took the same people who'd been failing for 20 years, and they became incredibly productive researchers. So today I work with the U.S. government on improving innovative performance, and that's really the subject of my talk. But it comes from all this experience working around the world, creating major innovations with companies, startups, and others. So I want to talk to you about a shift that we think is necessary from entrepreneurship to value creation. And I think it's a shift that can create a profound improvement in the innovative results and society. I always love to show this at the Drucker Forum. It's Peter Drucker is one of his most famous quotes. Because the purpose of a business is to create a customer, the business enterprise has two and only two basic functions: marketing and innovation. Everything else is cost. So to all the executives, I want to talk to you about a shift that we think is necessary from entrepreneurship to value creation. And I think it's a shift that can create a profound improvement in the innovative results and society. I always love to show this at the Drucker Forum. It's Peter Drucker is one of his most famous quotes. Because the purpose of a business is to create a customer, the business enterprise has two and only two basic functions: marketing and innovation. Everything else is cost. So to all the executives here, your number one job is basically innovation, value creation. How many people here train all of their staff to be value creators? Raise your hand. Okay, so last year I asked the audience at Drucker, I got 5 hands up out of 500 leaders in management and innovation. It's not taught. So how about the performance we have? We all know about Nokia and Kodak, who rapidly went away. If you're a listed company on the stock market, you last for 10 years before you go away. Almost all university tech transfer loses money, with a few exceptions when they have a drug. Most incubators in America lose money. National labs struggle to create any value from their technology. And even where I am in Venture City, Silicon Valley, 70% of venture capitalists lose money every year. 5% make 95% of the returns. Imagine. And in the United States, which is really horrifying, median income has not increased since 1970. I do not think we ought to be proud of what we have done over the last 30 years. Now, my question to the group here is, Is entrepreneurship the right focus? Even with 300 university entrepreneurial programs, 6,000 professors, 1,600 incubators, and billions of dollars of U.S. value, government value, being poured into entrepreneurship since the early 1980s, ventures of scale, that is to say, not mom and pops, these are companies that can actually grow to make a contribution, have dropped by 30%. Now, if you go into those incubators or tech transfer organizations or even big companies, and you actually go through a drill and figure out what they're doing, we don't decide this, they decide this. The projects they're working on that would have any value if they completed varies between 0 and about 30 or 40%. The average is certainly not much better than 20%. In other words, what most companies work on is waste. It has no value for the company or for society. And we see that everywhere we go around the world. That's where I think the problem is. You have to create value before you can be an entrepreneur. If we create more value, we'll create more entrepreneurial opportunities. At SRI, with 2,300 staff, who essentially none were entrepreneurs, we never taught entrepreneurship, but they were value creators, and we created one multi-billion-dollar business after another by focusing on value first and then entrepreneurship. The U.S. government has been taking notice of this. We just completed a major study, a 2-year study, documenting the limited performance, that most of the practices that are being used around the world are outdated. We need a paradigm shift. There is a paradigm shift possible, but we have to focus on value creation first. You start with first things first. And you might want to be interested in reading the report. So what are the factors that are limiting performance? Well, mostly people don't focus on the larger opportunities that they have. They focus on incremental things that they can do as opposed to things that would actually make a difference. They have no common value creation language. They don't understand the concepts. Walk into any company and have people write down the definition of innovation on a Post-it note and see what you see. We have never been in a team where they agreed. Right from the start, there's confusion. If you don't have shared mental frameworks for how to be a value creator, obviously collaboration suffers. Collaboration is usually terrible. In universities, it's horrible, as we all know. And people are using inappropriate methodologies. So teaching people how to fill out 12 venture charts, or the Heilmeyer criteria, or other ideas, is premature, actually confusing, until you've created value. Value creation is where everything starts. So recommendations were made by the National Academy. We need to teach our employees what value creation is. There ought to be a playbook. And use best practices. For example, how do you identify important global opportunities? How do you use core frameworks for thinking about what innovation is about? So to me, the most important one is the fundamental definition of the value proposition. I think this is the most important single concept. If you can get an organization to do it, it will transform your organization. 4 questions. What's the important customer need? What's the approach for the offering and the business model? What are the benefits per cost of the value of the idea? And how does that compare to the competition? 4 questions. They're all interconnected. If you change one, they all change. More complicated methodologies are exactly the wrong thing to do in the beginning. Having personally created innovations that are worth billions, we have never gone to a full business plan before we could answer these questions. And it would take us years to answer these questions. They're really hard to answer. More complicated systems do not work with real people. And we have a learning process that we use to help people get the answers they need faster, which I'll talk about later in the conference. And just one example of a best practice is, because teams don't understand these things, the best practice is to hold a workshop at the start of all new initiatives to make sure everybody does have common language and frameworks for value creation. And we're asked by the National Science Foundation, the biggest funding agency in the United States, to create a playbook for them, and we just delivered that to them. So in summary, I think if you look at the data, you'd agree that today's results are not what we want. And the problem starts at the beginning. It starts with a poor development of value that matters. Entrepreneurship comes second. And there's a paradigm improvement, possible improvement if we do that. And that's what we're working on. So we hope you'll consider, you'll be able to see the results we've produced online, and to use a playbook that encapsulates these ideas. And also the fact that we're in the innovation economy. And the most essential skill you can give your people is to be a value creator. If you cannot be a value creator in today's world, the chances are you're going to become obsolete at some point and maybe never work again. So I'd encourage you to give these skills to your staff. We're now working with major universities in the United States who are now teaching these skills to project-based teams. And I believe we're on the verge of creating a whole a suite of universities across America where projects will add to projects the ability to be value creators. Thank you very much.
Thank you.